I don't think there's a specific relationship between the three instruments and the colour vermilion at all, but the shared timbre palettes that I tried to create out of uniting the three instruments, well, that created almost, that created the basis of the piece. The piece is very much about pushing the borders between the three instruments and blurring the borders of the three instruments in a way. So it creates one single instrument in a way. But the vermilion I chose because I was fascinated investigating the historical and aesthetical history and the meaning of different colours. I was very interested when I started writing music, trying to refer to colour as a means of trying to not only to name what I was doing, which I found really, really hard, which I still find hard, to say exactly what I'm doing with my pieces. But back then I found it very important to try and find a means to create some kind of parallel, another way of trying to articulate what the pieces were all about for me. The piece traces a very particular kind of energy. It does actually get quite aggressive at some points. It's still nevertheless a very static structural form, but it drives on and on and on, and there is something about this canalization of a particularly almost aggressive energy in a positive form, in a work of art which really interests me, I think. Vermilion is also a colour. When I was much younger, we're going back a long way, I actually lived with a painter and he only painted in this colour, so I did get to know it very well indeed. So that is what drew me, I think, first of all back then to start thinking and talking about colour, because I was hanging out with painters and I was very aware of the way in which the colour was made. So I started investigating. What is vermilion? What is its history? What is its makeup? How was it made? And how vermilion has a very particular and special place in the history and the development of pigments of colour. So there was a whole background, there was a lot of things going on, and when I finally wrote the piece Vermilion, I had a very clear image of the kind of energy I wanted to articulate, and the piece itself is about exploring this space where a particular energy is given space to develop and to see what comes next. For me, there was no conscious parallel between fretlessness and the actual way in which I was writing. You call them like little haikus. I suppose that's a nice way of putting it, but I call them gestures. So moments, there's very clearly each what I call gesture, or what you would define as a haiku. Some of them I think go on too long to be a haiku, and are perhaps not so poetic in that respect. But definitely the beginning of each half of the piece has that quality, and I would agree with that. The fretlessness, I don't see the guitar as being fretless, because there are a lot of these sounds that I use with the metal bottleneck when we're going back and forwards within the fret and then going up to the next sound and down to the next sound. It's playing with the borders, isn't it, between a fretlessness guitar and the guitar itself, because when you go over the frets you also hear it. So in a way, I don't think I'm breaking down what the guitar is about. I think actually by using the metal bottleneck, one actually becomes all more aware of what the instrument is actually made of and how it is constructed. But yeah, the piece is a series of gestures, each of which come out of silence and disappear again into silence. And it was one of a succession of pieces which quite consciously explored what I would call a much more static form, where it doesn't start and go to a new place and then a whole new acoustic space is opened up. It's a series of gestures which are all working within the same kind of acoustic landscape. And I was exploring very consciously this kind of static form to see nothing changes through the piece in a way. All it does, it opens up, it goes into like almost the molecular structure of the sounds I'm exploring, and then distance itself really in a way. No, I don't think so. I see very much in vermilion that the three instruments work together as one, so I'm trying to create a single instrument out of the three. One of the reasons really for having three extremely different instruments, which brings so many different characteristics and tonal possibilities together. They're fused together really to make one single meta instrument in a way. The issue, I think, yes, the piece is very much about creating extremes, like you said. There is this very strong, what we keep using the word aggressive, but direct moments, and then there's an enormous amount of silence or very, very quiet music. These moments of silence vary though within the piece. I think that's important. They serve, of course, to frame the single gestures, but some of the silences are active, some of them are passive, some feel like a resonance, some are almost like a prelude to the gesture, to the next gesture that comes. A few of the silences are held notes, which feels like a shadow or a resonance if you were in an over-acoustic space. So I do explore on another level, I think, what is the role, not what is the role of silence, but what kind of different silences do we have? Are they moving? Are they active? Are they passive? So it was very important that the silences are just right. And it took me quite a long time to, what I would say, really in a way, weigh those silences to say, how pregnant is that silence? How heavy is that silence? Does it have to be a dead one? How long should it be so it's really cutting off and making a clear distinction between what has happened before and what is happening afterwards? So it was a piece which really explores what kind of silences you could use in between gestures. Absolute extremes of extremely loud, extremely quiet, abrasive sounds, and then on the other hand, there are very many very expressive, overtly lyrical moments. So there's still something very romantic about the piece, I think, in a way, really, despite its so-called static form. every composer works with space, because sound moves through space. So it's a parameter which is always present, and I think which, when you're composing, you are aware of it to a certain degree. Music is, it's fleeting in time and space. So this spatial aspect is incredibly important, and at some point I think it's fascinating to focus in on that. But then taking the spatial aspect of the musical performance and actually making that a foreground parameter, something which is really emphasized and brought really out into the open, is something which has interested me since about, since 2003 I suppose, when I started my Chroma series and did Inside Out. But it wasn't until later that I started actually writing compositions which have no other point of reference, which are really just completely, almost like the soloists are almost like kind of abstract protagonists in a kind of theatre which you don't actually understand what it's about, really. Maybe it's a bit like Beckett in that respect. And Stirring Still is, of course, a title from Beckett. You're right there, absolutely. Yeah, it's a kind of theatre. I think there's something about playing, exploring the borderline between a concert performance and a kind of abstract theatrical situation. You're setting up an acoustic landscape, and you're articulating the architectural characteristics of the space, and the musicians and the performer and the musicians and the public are in a shared acoustic space. I think there's something very interesting about the physicality of that experience. One becomes very aware that, but it is in Vermilion as well, because in Vermilion you have these moments of silence, so you have this distance then. And then the sound pulls you in and then takes you back again. So that, I think it does already explore that issue, actually. Because I think if you're thinking about musical the density of a musical texture, and then you thin out that density, you're also playing with the space inside the musical gesture as well. So.